right, so we're going to talk a little bit about plant selection here. Um, Plant selection is something that we've kind of talked about through Plant ID. We've kind of mentioned it multiple times, but we'll give some specific examples of things that you need to think about. The challenge we always have with landscape design, of course, is thinking about the art of it, thinking about form composition, and thinking about the fact that we are working with a material here, plants that are alive. And so they behave and react and respond, and those are all the things that we do need to consider when we're putting them into our landscapes. So some of the things to consider, obviously hardiness. You can click and go through to the hardiness map. You can kind of see the map here. This is an older version of the map. It has been updated to show that all of Ohio now is a zone 6 rather than a zone 5, which is what's showing on here. The pocket that's right here, right around the Mansfield area, still existed as a zone 5. Worcester's pretty much the same way. Your zone is going to be a little bit different, kind of depending upon where you are in the country. Think about cultural requirements. Think about Acer griseum, paperbark maple, and how particular it can be. And then we look at Stewartia, one of the coolest barks. But if you don't have exact cultural requirements in terms of great pH, in terms of fantastic drainage, in terms of a shaded, protected location, plant will just die. Shagbark hickory is another one. I mean, it's fairly non-picky in terms of what it likes, but it really does prefer to have some covering on its roots. Here we have chinkapin oak. Chinkapin oak is another one that is a fairly easy landscape plant to grow, but would definitely prefer a more acidic environment. And then there's things like hosta. Hosta will grow just about any place. They're not really all that concerned with things. We know light and wind condition and city conditions and all those sorts of things can become an issue. So what's going on with these trees? They're leaning from lack of light. Notice this little tree here. I shot this while I was driving out in Texas. And there aren't very many trees in the area in Texas that we were crossing. And the few trees that were there looked exactly like this one. You can literally see the direction that the wind blows. All the trees look like this. Don't look at the cars. This is kind of an old picture. But what kind of conditions do these trees have to put up with? Pollution, compaction, people walking on their roots, people plucking their leaves, power lines in some areas, dogs peeing on them is one of the worst types of conditions that we can have for trees. Are the plants that we're using durable? This was a pin oak over at the College of Worcester, and one day I was walking my dogs and the thing just snapped and fell. So I went and looked closer, and you can see right here there was a crack in the tree, and water got in there and eventually rotted the whole thing out, and half the tree just fell down. You can see the salt conditions here. I'm amused that the line still stayed there. You could see the salt. You could see exactly where the salt came up to on these taxus and the damage that these plants took. Now, if you look here, you can see all the little green coming through. Those are going to recover, but they're never going to look exactly right. So you have to think about all these sorts of things when you're planting plants and the types of conditions that they're going to be dealing with. What do you guys think happened here? This is snow load. We had really, really harsh snows, bent the plants in half, and those plants never recovered fully. This is the type of thing that can cause all kinds of damage. Now, evergreens are pretty tough, but you get really heavy, wet snow, and that can cause damage that you don't even think about. What's going on here? You see how half this plant is missing? Right down the line. That's salt damage. This is a salt-tolerant species along a freeway showing salt damage. So you do have to consider all kinds of different things, again, with the line. But let's continue this line. Why is this tree doing poorly and this tree doing just fine? They're not that far apart from each other. That's how close these plants can be, and yet the conditions are totally different. So we do have to consider soil pH, and does the plant require something or prefer something? What is the moisture level? What is the drainage? What is the nutrient availability? And all of that plays back to pH. Are you going to have wildlife issues, both positive and negative? Everybody thinks the things with the big brown eyes are the cute, adorable things, but some of them can be very, very destructive. Some of them are positive things. Here's a little guy right here. He's a positive little guy. Probably a female in this case. But we don't think about that when we put plants and things in our landscape. We will be attracting animals. Do your plants have thorns or spines? Are their branching patterns weird or different or something that we're going to have to take into consideration? How fast do they grow? Fruit can be a positive or a negative thing depending upon the individual. We have to think of the seasonal aspects of it. What's the foliage color like? Can we have different foliage colors in spring and summer and autumn and seasonal aspects of it? So if we take a look at some of these things, so this guy right here, this is a type of pear tree. Looks really wonderful. It turns out it's one of the most aggressive, nasty things on the planet. Right here, beautiful plant, thorns. Here's another one. Beautiful plant, thorns. Look at the spines on this guy. This is not a plant for the faint-hearted. And this is really not a plant for the faint-hearted. Look at the thorns on that. So are you trying to keep people in? Are you trying to keep people out? Or are you trying to give people the startle of their lives when they're going around and doing their weeding on certain things? Their winter characteristics. This is Kentucky coffee tree over here on the left-hand side. Look how coarse and beautiful and rugged and almost Halloween-y that looks in the wintertime. And yet over on the right-hand side, you have Japanese Hakon grass and this wonderful cascading waterfall impact to it. You could use that to mimic a waterfall, to mimic something hanging over a retaining wall when there's no retaining wall there. We need to look at bark characteristics. Look at this wonderful, smooth, silvery bark. This happens to be American yellowwood. So it's a plant that is a wonderful medium-sized tree with great yellow flowers and orangey fall color. And it's got this really interesting bark to it. Over on the left-hand side, here we have a Japanese pyrus that's showing its spring leaf color. We all know fall color foliage, looks fantastic. Down here on the lower right-hand side, those plants aren't in the arboretum anymore, but I still think they're showing some of the excellent range of fall colors that we can have in our plants. Again, fall color. You're seeing things in the arboretum. The lower right-hand corner is in Worcester Cemetery. So you can see the fall color even on a hydrangea. There's a sugar maple in the background showing its beautiful fall color. But spring seasonal color, it's just seasonal color. There's a 9-bark in the upper left-hand corner showing its wonderful purple foliage year-round. Even spirea. Spirea is not a favorite plant of mine, but even they can have a great seasonal color to them. Fruit color. Is fruit a good thing or a bad thing? On this beautyberry, probably most people would consider it a good thing because it's a beautiful purple fall color. On a crabapple, you might consider that a good thing while the apples are on the tree. The instant those apples fall, it might be a bad thing. Plant size, and we always talk about designing for plant maturity, but you have to consider how long that client wants that plant in the ground. If that client's only going to be at that house for the next 5 years, then what you need to consider is how fast is that plant going to grow over the next 5-year period of time. If they're going to be there for the rest of their life, then you've got a much longer time frame to think about how fast that plant is going to grow. Because plants get big. Plants get huge. So if you look at the picture on the left, that's an American elm. Right here, you can kind of see the roof of a 3-story house. You can see the car down here, so I'll give you an idea of the size of this trunk. It would take 4 or 5 people to hug that particular tree. Over on the right-hand side is a walnut. Now, this walnut, if you look really, really close, you'll see that this walnut was actually struck by lightning. And that's why we've got this line that runs down it. You can actually see part of the tree blown off right here. But that is a park bench. Give you an idea of how big that tree was. This is a beach. This is a European beach. You can see the people, so it gives you an idea of how tall these plants can get. And if you're going to have a situation where you can allow the plant to live for 150, 200, 300 plus years, then you need to make sure there's space for that sort of thing. Is the plant going to spread as it grows? These are red twig dogwoods. They look fantastic. They need to be pruned to be maintained. Are they going to spread and continue to sucker and spread into places where you don't want them to spread? Weeping willows look great by the water, but look how big these guys are. There are actually 2 plants here, so it's not one. They're actually, look close, there are 2 plants here, but these are very, very large plants. So we've talked about size ranges in other classes, anywhere from, small, medium, large. Some people consider anything over roughly that 50, 60 foot range, no matter its height, large. Some people will have a different category of huge or giant trees. Same thing with our shrubs. Those are size ranges for that. But you have to keep in mind that while most people would consider something under 6 feet small, depending upon the size of the property, 6 feet might actually be a fairly large shrub, depending upon the size of the property. What are the client's expectations? What are your expectations? Are you also doing the maintenance for it? How long is this plant supposed to be in the landscape? Yes, we can plant a red oak, and that red oak can live for 500 years, but is it going to actually be expected to live for 500 years? I talked to an urban forester in New York one time, and he said if he gets 8 years out of his trees, he's ecstatic because that's how harsh an environment is. And so he expects those trees to live anywhere from 5 to 8 years max before he's having to replace them. So you have to consider time and the expectations. Are your plants available? Can they be shipped to you? Are you shipping them from all the way across the country? And what were the growing conditions of those plants when in the nursery? A lot of our nursery stock comes from the Pacific Northwest. That's fantastic. They've got great conditions. It opens up all kinds of things that we might not be able to grow normally or easily or in our nurseries. But it also means that those plants now have to adapt. So can you get them? Can you get them shipped? Is it appropriate for them to be shipped because the conditions that they were growing in previously are now different from the conditions that you're going to plant them in? How long is it going to take them to adapt? Are they going to have more transplant shock? So you do have many, many things to consider, and not just sunshade. Yes, that's usually the first question we ask. It should be one of the first questions we ask. But we also need to consider soil pH, soil type, adaptability of the plants, growth speed, all of the ornamental characteristics for it. So there's a lot to think about when you're dealing with living organisms in terms of our landscape designs. All right, again, as always, got any questions? Don't hesitate to get in touch.